Hey guys, Graham and Chris back here with you again. We are about 2 weeks away from the start of the regular baseball season. The WBC is in full effect. Second round should be coming to a close tonight. It is March 18th at the time we are doing the show, so unfortunately by the time the show probably goes up and you guys get a chance to listen, the USA Dominican Republic game will already be finished, but we're going to preview that a little bit and talk about the WBC as a whole. Some unfortunate injuries to get to, and then to have a little bit of fun because Chris and I haven't had a hefty fight in the last couple of weeks. We are going to break down and rank all 6 divisions in Major League Baseball, best division all the way to the bottom. That's going to be encompassing all the teams inside of that division. So let's put the ball in play, my man. What is going on? I know you are the massive amount of homework from last week is gone, but there is still a pretty decent amount left as you are kind of rounding second on the way to third for your last semester in school.
Yeah, I don't have quite as much homework as I did last week. This week it's only a couple of papers to write, but I am definitely feeling the burn. We're in what we like to call the second half, first down, first series of the second half. At least that's what my teacher tells me. He's a football guy. I don't really understand the reference. I like to call this the sort of late fifth inning. And but we're getting there. This is the last semester I have coursework, so I'm really looking forward to not going to class next semester. That'll be fun. But I'm also really looking forward.
And the worst part of college is you can't go to the bullpen. You got to throw a complete game the entire semester. So if you're getting tired out, you got to suck it up and just keep on throwing.
I am looking forward, however, to the beginning of the baseball season, which will start April 2nd. I will be at Chase Field April 2nd to watch the Arizona Diamondbacks play the San Francisco Giants in their home opener. I think it's going to be a whole lot of fun. And
Homer alert, Homer alert, Homer alert, Homer alert.
And, of course, baseball season will be underway, and nothing is better than baseball season being underway. But we do have some unfortunate injuries to get to, and we're going to start the show out with it. I know it's kind of a downer to start the show on an injury report, but there's only a couple,
unfortunately, that's kind of been the running theme this week, which is kind of the bummer. There hasn't been a ton of stuff to get to besides guys going down, and there's a pretty decent calendar length of these injury recovery times.
Right. And the first one we're going to get to is going to affect the Colorado Rockies. Ian Desmond broke the second metatarsal on his left hand. That's his pointer finger.
You mean metacarpal?
That's right. Sorry, I'm reading the report that says metatarsal, which is written by someone who obviously isn't.
Wait. You're going to blame somebody else after. Before we came on the air, you ranted and raved that this person said metatarsal, and now you're going to blame them because you didn't edit yourself.
Because I'm reading the page. It is his second metacarpal, on his left hand, which is his pointer finger, for those of you who don't know. And it looks like he's going to be out for a while. He had surgery on Wednesday to repair it, and they're hoping that they're going to get him back in April. At least Bud Black's saying that they're hopeful and expectant to have him back in April. But until then, that first base position is going to be an open hole on the right side of that infield.
And that's rough, man, because they just signed him to a 5-year, $70 million deal. I mean, comes over. Really was a huge grab for them. They picked him up from Texas last year after he'd spent plenty of time with the Nationals. Kind of bet on himself and ended up taking a 1-year deal, but it's still $70 million to play in the most hitter-friendly park of all. Definitely is going to make sense. And, he's one of those pieces why you and I talked about when we were bringing the Rockies up on our NL West breakdown about a month and a half ago or so, that we really thought that a lot of the pieces they added, like him, like a couple of the back-end pieces in the bullpen, of course, Trevor Story coming back, all the big guys in the outfield, that the Rockies had a chance to contend. Now, granted, they have a young pitching staff, and we're going to get into that later when we break down the divisions, but this is a tough thing, and we've seen it happen a pretty decent amount because as these guys begin to play a little bit deeper into games, it doesn't always mean when your stars for one team are playing deep that the other team isn't throwing someone who's a little bit shorter in the tooth, if you will, up in the big leagues. And this ended up being a pitch from Reds player Rookie Davis during the fourth inning. And, the kid's 23 years old. So his highest last year, he saw a little bit of AAA in Louisville. Hasn't even been up in the big club yet. Ends up fracturing one of the big guys' hands for the Rockies. So it's one of the things you get into. I saw it happen in Vieira with the National about 4 years ago when Steven Strasburg broke a ton of stuff in was it Jay Bruce? I can't remember who it was, but for the Mets. So yeah, it's an unfortunate part that tends to happen deeper into spring training when we're starting to get more innings for a lot of your big names.
Yeah, fortunately for the Rockies, they do have a pretty solid backup first baseman in Mark Reynolds, and he's a guy who can play the position, has played the position for them, played 118 games between second and third base last season, first and second base last season, hit 282, 14 long balls, but he's not as capable, and he's not as versatile as Ian Desmond is. So expect them to be anxiously awaiting Desmond's return.
No doubt. And Reynolds and Desmond are both about the same age, 31, 33. But, this is a guy who, when you sign to that 5-year deal, you're expecting to have him when the season starts and run it all the way through. And unfortunately, that's just not going to happen. Hopefully we get a quick recovery. You and I both know, especially, if there's one difficulty here, even more so as a first baseman, and you can probably speak this a little bit better if we kind of get ready to roll off of this topic. Of all the hands that need to be the healthiest, for him it's going to be his left hand because he is a right-handed hitter. It's where he's going to be receiving those hard throws across a diamond. Would he be able to, let's say he still has some discomfort. Now, granted, swinging the bat's going to be uncomfortable, but would he be able to play with if he had broken it in the right hand sooner because he's not having to grip the baseball and throw it as much, where he's more focused on being able to just field? As someone who's played the base, who I know has had some broken bones between getting stepped on and getting hit, what's your experience like when it comes to that, and the difference in being having a broken bone in your right hand compared to your left hand and being a left-handed glove?
Well, he would probably come back sooner from a break to the right hand. Now, on either hand, playing the base, that pointer finger is a bad injury. Because obviously, for most people, when you throw a baseball, unless you're a pitcher throwing a specific pitch, when you throw a baseball, those first two fingers are the last two to touch the ball as they come out of the hand. And having any discomfort can really affect both the power that you can throw with and how accurately you throw. But first basemen aren't really responsible for a whole lot of accurate throwing, so he probably could come back with a right-hand injury faster than a left-hand injury. The only positive thing I can think of is as a first baseman, he can probably comfortably play with, if he's still feeling a little discomfort, he can probably play with that first finger on his left hand tucked out of the glove. That's how I played when I was coming back from a hand injury. And I just untucked the pointer finger on my left hand. It does increase the amount of wobble that you get in the basket. And for some people that's too much. It makes it too uncertain. But if he is feeling a little discomfort, he can probably just pull that right finger, that first finger out of the glove, and like you see a lot of pitchers do, and play that way. But if
and I mean,
look
the good thing
to
is
him
Yeah.
Look to him not coming back if there's any pain. Now, discomfort and pain are two different things. But look to him not coming back if there's any pain whatsoever, because the danger of re-breaking that metacarpal in that first finger is really high if he plays with that finger in the glove, because if a throw is off the basket, that's the finger it's going to hit.
Right. And there are some guys available. Justin Morneau, who definitely really at the tail end of his career. We saw him play with Team Canada a little bit in the WBC. Wasn't that effective. Ryan Howard, Billy Butler, Kelly Johnson, a few of the big first base names that are still on in free agency, haven't found a new team. The problem with Ryan Howard, he's a big strikeout issue, and I don't know if he's at that point where he's willing to be a guy who is a majority bench guy, and that's going to be the hard thing for him. So hopefully, like I said, Mark Reynolds is a good piece, and then we'll see if they go out and look for anybody else just to have an extra backup. The problem is if Mark Reynolds is a primary first baseman, you don't want to kill your bench with two first baseman guys and no other utility guys.
Right, and the problem with Reynolds is, like you said, is Reynolds is also a strikeout to walk ratio even out a little bit to show a little bit of patience at the plate that he just doesn't have.
Yeah. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting. I hope for the Rockies' sake that this moves quickly, because they did have a really nice tail end of the year last year. They really seemed so far out of contention and really turned it on and made a heck of a run, very similar to what we saw the Mariners and the Tigers do within the last year. And again, we're going to touch on those teams here in just a little bit. As we flip around, and we've been talking about the WBC as well, and I don't know about you, but when I was going over this week the divisions, the WBC kind of affected my rankings a little bit just based on those guys that I want to see if they're going to be able to play the same way they did last year. They had the same fire, the same pop, and being able to see these guys in a full-blown competitive capacity really affected kind of a couple of my team rankings and probably bumped one division up or down, by a tick or two. But one of the teams we talked about that, for all intents and purposes, really just are playing behind the eight ball horrendously. And this is something actually you and I didn't talk about pre-show, but I want to touch on. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission officially released their investigative findings on the boat crash that took the life of Marlins pitcher Jose Fernandez and two other friends, and they have found that he was, in fact, driving the boat. His injuries on his torso, upper body, are consistent with the injuries and markings that were found on the center console of the boat. He was obviously extremely inebriated, and it's that had he survived, he would have been looking at multiple charges, including a boating under the influence, would have been multiple manslaughter charges because of his friends that had passed away. Just a horrible thing all the way around. If you want to touch on this a little bit more, we can certainly do that. But one of his teammates, Martin Prado, a 300 hitter last year for the Marlins, now has a hopefully minor hamstring strain, which he suffered playing in the WBC against Team Venezuela's loss to the USA this past Wednesday.
Right, and Marlins manager Don Mattingly is really hopeful that this is a minor strain. In fact, he said, hopefully it's a minor grade 1 strain and that we're able to kind of continue and have him ready, but we'll just have to wait and see. And the reason that he really wants this to be a minor strain and he really wants Martin Prado back in the lineup at the beginning of this season is because Martin Prado is probably the number 2 hitter on that team. We're talking about a guy who had 305 last year, drove in 75 RBI. He's a career 293 hitter over the last 10 years. He's been great on many of the teams that he's been on. Like we said before the show, you were talking about he was on the Braves for a little while, and you were pretty impressed with him there. So obviously,
do you have
the
him number 2 to Yelich or Stanton? I'm just curious.
Stanton. I have a number
Stanton?
2 to Stanton. Now, if Yelich continues to hit the way he's hitting in the WBC, which again
this
we'll
kid's
get
a
to,
beast. That kid is an absolute beast.
Then that could change because Giancarlo Stanton is not performing the way you would expect him to, based on his $320 million contract. And Yelich really is. I mean, Yelich is really performing in the WBC right now. He's a lot of fun to watch. And so that might change. But as of right now, I think that Prado's probably number 2 to Stanton, just in terms of batting average and power.
So, obviously, it goes to, and we touched on this last week, of, is the WBC worth it because of guys getting injured like this? Obviously, we almost had the issue with Salvi Perez. Miguel Cabrera has a back injury. He is done for the remainder of the WBC. Now, Omar Vizquel, who is going to be a surefire, I think, first ballot Hall of Famer next year for his first time on the ballot when he becomes eligible. He's the manager for Team Venezuela, also is a bench coach for Brad Ausmus, the Tigers. He has contacted Ausmus and said, hey, no worries, this is all precautionary, everything's kosher. We just don't want to go ahead and risk Miggy in something that grand scheme isn't what he's getting paid a lot of money for. Now, as far as Prado goes, you're right. Now, and I think you touched on this, that out of his, 7 hits, I believe that he had in the WBC, he had, 3 extra base hits. He's a career 293 hitter, but last year hit 305, 75 ribs for the Fish. Definitely a piece, and you talk to guys like Derek Dietrich, somebody who is considered, along with Miguel Rojas, to be a piece who can replace him for a small time being if necessary. But he said, and Dietrich said of Prado, quote, "It's definitely a big loss to lose your captain. I've been in this situation before. I just prepare like I'm going to help the team every day," end quote. And that just goes to speak as to what Prado means, not only with his performance on the field, but what it means for him off the field and him being told he is the captain. We saw really how, I think, instrumental he was, along with, and D. Gordon was more the emotional face, but Prado was kind of that rock when that entire club was around that mound the game after Fernandez passed away. You could tell he was really the guy who was the heartbeat of that team, holding everybody together as they went out and had just a beautiful game against the Mets. I mean, I can't ever forget watching that game.
Right. Yeah, I think that this is obviously. I don't think that the Marlins are in a position to compete this season.
Yeah,
you and I have discussed it. I just don't think that the Marlins have any shot. I think they're going to end up probably at the bottom of that division, and will be lucky. And you could probably put it on the shoulders of their 3 big hitters if they break the 500 mark this season.
I think so. I agree. And guys, just a quick reminder, you can find all of our previous shows, interviews, a lot of fun stuff on all of our social media pages. It's at OO Left Field on Twitter, also Out of Left Field with Chris and Graham on Facebook, and check out the Out of Left Field Baseball community page. A lot of Facebook groups for baseball on the Facebook app. But again, give the Out of Left Field Baseball community a like. It's a fun place for everyone to talk about everything from umpiring to hitting, all different levels. Just a place to have some fun. Just be respectful and enjoy yourself.
If Ian Desmond has a serious injury to his hamstring, then I think
Prado.
I'm sorry, Martin Prado. Yeah,
okay.
I'm sorry. If Martin Prado has a serious injury to his hamstring, then I really think that the Marlins are going to be in a far worse position, especially since they're going to start off this season without him. They're going to be starting from behind. And as poorly as I assume they're going to do, and look, if you're a Marlins fan, I apologize. I can only go by what I see.
No, wait, I just want to be clear, because before we get the hate, are you apologizing because they're Marlins fans, or are you apologizing to Marlins fans because Prado may be injured and could cause a rougher start to the season.
The second
Just
one.
so I know. Okay. So he's just sorry for the injury, guys. He's not sorry
Right.
that you're Marlins fans. But hopefully you have a new owner soon, and that's.
I'll leave that up to you.
I am. I'm definitely the one who's closer. I'll be getting a lot more of the hate than you will.
So, but yeah, this Martin Prado thing could be a big deal to the beginning of their season, and starting from behind is not a good look for the Marlins. And like I said before the show, the Marlins aren't a great look anyway, so it could be really bad for them. But
now, a guy that you and I have talked about a lot, and a staple of this show has been two things recently, unfortunately. One was Matt Wieters, and we aren't talking about Matt Wieters. But another thing that we talk about, I swear, on a consistent basis is pitching. Pitching in one form or another. And unfortunately, what's that?
And we wonder why. It's arguably the most important thing in baseball.
Exactly. Well, yeah, I mean, because it's, you talk about, umpires. Well, the plate umpire has the most responsibility because he is doing something every play. So is the pitcher. Pitcher has a responsibility on every single play to do something, just like the catcher. Well, unfortunately, as we get into really the last big injury news, we held it for last. It's probably the biggest one, is that Nationals ace, undeniable ace, Max Scherzer is likely to miss the season opener because of a stress fracture in his finger. Now, this is, I believe, his right ring finger. So in this case, it's his throwing hand. Definitely not something that you want to hear, especially when you hear stress fracture. That never really makes you comfortable. They said that it's caused him to change the grip on his fastball, placing 3 fingers on top of the ball instead of 2. He went back to his old grip Thursday, and actually had a chance to do a minor league game against the New York Mets AAA players, which probably made them either quiver in the box or have stains in the back of their pants once they got done facing him. But it's definitely a good thing to at least hear that he's already throwing while spring training is still in effect.
Yeah, it's good because, like we talked about last week when we were talking about injured pitchers, the problem is that if he gets out of throwing, then his comeback is delayed even further because he's got to get back into the throwing program, advance through the throwing program, do rehab starts, and then come back and join the Washington Nationals. And if that's going to take him until the end of April to get through all that, the Nationals might be done, with the threat looming of a really powerful or a really excited and hungry Mets team hanging over the Nationals. The Nationals also don't want to start from behind in that National League East.
No, definitely. Because the Mets are thinking that last year should have been their year, and they just got completely everything just came off the tracks with injuries to all big 3 arms, and now they're all healthy. Majority of them are young, and their hair is just flowing. Plus, as someone who hasn't watched the show yet, I know you have, that Noah Syndergaard's excited because he has a chance. Apparently, he has had a role in Game of Thrones. I mean, he already basically just needed wardrobe because he has the hair and everything else for that show, from what I see.
Right. He could also play a role in Vikings. I mean, he's got the name. He's got all of it. He's got the look.
Yeah, he already is. He's in the Avengers. Sorry, Chris Hemsworth, but you've been replaced.
Yeah, I think so. So the Max Scherzer news is obviously the biggest injury, but it's heartening to see him go back to that 2-finger grip on the top of that 4-seam fastball. And the reason for that is fastballs, especially that 4-seam fastball, which is the fastest of the fastballs, are dependent upon as little contact with the hand as possible. And because the more contact it has with the hand, the more friction, the more speed it takes off. That's why changeups have a lot of contact deep in the hand. Fastballs, not so much. A little top thumb contact, 2 fingers, and that's really it as far as contact with the ball.
A lot of people think that a four-seamer means multiple fingers. A four-seamer really is just usually, your middle finger, your ring finger, and your thumb for support. And then it's just arm speed and drive off of those off those legs.
Right. And it's how the hand crosses the seams on the ball. Basically, the top two fingers will come in contact with the two seams coming across the ball. The bottom thumb will be in contact with a seam, and those support fingers will be in contact, barely touching a seam. That's why there's four seams being used. If we ever get to make videos, I can show you what a four-seam grip looks like, but on radio it doesn't really work. But having three fingers on the top of that ball is adding friction and taking speed off that fastball. So it's really good to hear him getting back to throwing with two fingers, which means that his velocity is going to come up. Hopefully that means that his finger is rehabbing at a good pace. That all could be really good news for the Washington Nationals. Now, I don't know what it's going to mean for his other pitches, because he does throw some other pitches that require that finger to be a little more dexterous, and so we'll have to wait and see how that works. But it's good to hear that the possibility of him having a little bit more velocity on that fastball.
And the one thing that I think would worry me the most with this is, had it not come to light, kind of like what we saw with Matt Harvey last year, is would he have ended up injuring his elbow or shoulder by trying to overthrow to compensate for that friction and lost velocity? It definitely is better that it happens now. You can find out, you can heal it, you can go ahead and get everything back to normal and move on, and that's the important thing. And they asked him after that minor league start with the Mets AAA players. He said, quote, this is Scherzer speaking, "That's the really good news today. It's good to be back on the normal grip. From here on out, I'll be obviously progressing that way. Now I'm dialing it in, trying to hit locations, and really trying to pitch with the fastball again. Now I feel back," end quote. He struck out 5 in that game, which is the important thing. And where pitching coach Mike Maddox, Hall of Famer Greg Maddox's brother, was a longtime pitching coach for the Rangers, came over to the Nats I think last year, the season before. He said that Max Scherzer will start this coming Wednesday, which is a very good thing. So that'll be the 22nd. He said, quote, "We'll take the training wheels off." So that's what you want to hear. You want to know that a guy who I think is widely considered one of the better pitching coaches, if not one of the top pitching coaches in the league, to hear. And Scherzer should get about 3 more starts before the season and expects to break camp with the club, which is unfortunately you're probably not going to be able to give him the start. But then again, when you've got Tanner Roark, who still could probably pitch number 2 without much issue, and Steven Strasburg, who isn't a bad piece, that to say, well, sorry, but we'll give Strauss the start, you can at least breathe a small sigh of relief if you're Dusty Baker's club.
Right. And even more of a sigh of relief because with Strasburg having some of those consistency issues that he had last season, it'll be really important for Scherzer to get back into that rotation as quickly as possible, because him returning to Cy Young form is going to be the key to them retaining the top spot in that division.
No doubt. And as he said, I should be progressing at a pretty good clip now to allow myself to be able to find a way to start the regular season. What surprised me when they asked Dusty Baker of his availability on opening day, and Dusty said, and it makes sense, said, quote, "At this point, probably no. Opening day, I'm sure, is important to him, but not as important as the rest of the season. I'm sure he's not thinking DL. We're not thinking DL until that time gets here. If that time gets here, we'll make alternative plans," end quote. So I don't think there's anything to worry about. He's already thrown some batting practice. He's at this point now not, now he's just playing around and getting himself comfortable. What I'm interested to see is, if anything, what did that 3-finger grip give him to play around with now? Is that something that if he became comfortable using for a bit, can he use that to his advantage and create a new pitch? Which, I mean, that's all hitters need to hear, is that, yeah, Max Scherzer was hurt, but while he was hurt, he developed something new, and now you guys got to figure it out because we can't scout it because we haven't seen it before. That makes everybody excited, I'm so sure.
Absolutely, because if he can get used to having that third finger on the ball, and just tuck that pointer finger in, he could even theoretically he could develop a really strong knuckle curve, which you and I both know is not a pitch that's thrown a lot, but it's a pitch that's really effective in the big leagues. And if that's something that he could add to his repertoire, then I mean, I can only imagine Max Scherzer getting better because of it.
Yeah, without a doubt. So, and I mean, I don't think there's any worry. I know Scherzer's getting, he's over 30 now, I believe, and we talked about how, what that can mean to guys like Verlander and age, but we've seen Scherzer just get better. So I believe that's what's going to happen here. If something does change, obviously, guys, we're gonna bring it to you. If it happens midweek, you will find it on all of our social media pages at OO Left Field on Twitter, and of course, Out of Left Field, hosted by Chris and Graham on Facebook. Now, over to the WBC. We came last week. We're talking about the game, which was obviously the original heartbreaker of the USA and the DR when Andrew Miller got whacked around the yard and couldn't believe that was going to happen. Last night, it ended up being Marcus Stroman, who was just getting smacked like crazy in the first inning. It went, 20 pitches, I believe, 20 plus for just the first out. They got the first, I think, 6 guys on base, something like that. It was 4-0, and then, of course, ended up being really a throwing error by Nolan Arenado, which – and actually, I want to touch on this because you and I discussed this, and I was a little bit surprised. And this kind of comes back if we're talking about your primary playing experience as first base, correct?
Right.
So those of you guys who didn't see it, I'm sure you can find it on MLB.com on their videos. You can YouTube it, whatever it might be. But in the – I think it was the 7th inning, something like that last night. It was later on in the game. There was a chopper hit over to third base, kind of a funky hop by Nolan Arenado, who had fielded it relatively cleanly and kind of just spiked it about 5 or 6 feet away from Eric Hosmer across the diamond. Now, to me, that looked like a bad throw the entire time, which, granted, it was. But your first thing is, to me, that was an error on Hosmer, which absolutely made me – it kind of blew my mind. Not I necessarily disagree with you, but I was you really surprised me with that being your first take as a first baseman. I understand why we talked about it, but I want you to kind of explain to all of our listeners why, granted, the scorekeeper would never score it that way, but why as a first baseman, that to you is one of those – there's no way you shouldn't make that play if you're playing at that level.
And the reason is because it's the first baseman's job to stop that ball. That ball bounced, yes, 5 or 6 feet in front of the base, and I understand that is a throwing error 100 times out of 99, right? There's no way that that's not going to get scored a throwing error on the third baseman, Nolan Arenado. But that ball bounced in front of the plate or bounced in front of the base and then bounced over the base. That means that Eric Hosmer didn't have to stretch. He didn't have to reach. All he had to do was get in front of that ball. He may not have made the play at first base for the out, but he would have stopped 2 runs from scoring. In my opinion, there is no excuse for a first baseman not to block a ball that bounces in front of the base and goes over the base. I understand that it's traditional and coaches really like having left-handed guys at first base, but in my opinion, this is where they run into disadvantage. Because now Eric Hosmer has to turn. I was going to
say, as a base guy, I'm used to seeing a righty being able to just stretch and scoop. He's got to turn that glove sideways on a scoop like that. Is that kind of, as a righty, what you see it?
And he's a left-handed guy, so what he had to do to get the glove over there was he had to turn towards the runner. He had to turn to face the runner and try to turn that glove backhand, and stab it down at that ball as it came in. Now,
what happened when that ball went past him? And what happened when that ball went past him? He fell on his butt.
His knees. Right. He was on his backside. And the problem with that is that it creates 2 issues. First being that when you turn towards the runner, now you're looking at a freight train barreling down the first baseline at you. And I don't care who you are, how long you've been playing the game, when your foot's on the bag and a freight train's barreling down the line at you, you're going to flinch a little bit. And you can see in the still image, Eric Hosmer is flinching away from that not impact, because it was never going to be an impact. I doubt that runner was ever going to make contact with Eric Hosmer. But the way he had to move towards the base to make that play makes that impact more of a reality to him. So he's flinching away from the ball, trying to stab down with the glove. The ball bounces up over his feet, across the base, and over off into foul territory, allowing 2 runs to score. Now, I'm not going to say that a right-handed first baseman would have made that play 100% of the time, but he would have been in a better position to make that play just because his body would have already been turned the right way. And instead of Hosmer turning and stabbing the glove, what Hosmer should have done is give up the out at first base, give up the play at first base, and move his body in front of that bad throw. Put his body on the line, stop the ball. So
you're saying almost charge it like an infielder, because at that point you know that the likelihood of you scooping that ball is next to none, so go ahead and charge it just to hold the runner at third. So, and also let's not forget that if he ends up being in the runner's path and there's no baseball there, we've got an obstruction as well, which is going to already be an issue because he's, even though you're used to being a catcher, he's blocking a base without a baseball. It's obstruction. So I guess – so let me ask you, if you were a scorer here, and granted there's so many intricacies of scoring. I've done it once or twice, for minor league baseball, and it's not the easiest thing. You're looking at a lot of things at one time, and especially in the minors, you don't have you don't have replay and be able to rewind and watch where things happen. But so would you have charged the first run, basically – that Arenado had a one-base error and then a fielding error on Hosmer caused a second run? Is that almost what you're saying you would do? Is because of the way that he tried to backhand that ball instead of coming up and just blocking it? And the hard thing, everyone's going to say, well, yeah, but you want to get the out if you can. I think the issue that you have is that there was really no chance of getting the out. I mean, the out was probably a foregone conclusion anyway, so why not go ahead and just stop the ball and keep the runner at third?
Between the bad hop that it took on the hit, which Arenado fielded beautifully, that he recovered that bad hop beautifully. If he would have, and he even took a second to set, if he would have just made a good throw, we wouldn't be having this conversation because it wasn't the bad hop on the hit that caused this issue. But Arenado's throw was bad, and that at least allowed a run to score. You can't charge the first baseman with an error there because the error is on the throw. Scoring-wise, the error is on the throw. That's an E5, 2 bases, absolutely 100%. However, as a first baseman, I have very little sympathy for Eric Hosmer not stopping that ball. In fact, I expect Eric Hosmer to stop that ball because that's his job. And I'm sure, even being an umpire, you've heard the phrase, we're going to trade runs for outs. You've heard this phrase before? That's where you'll throw to get the easy out at first base just to get the out, even if it allows a run to score from third, because you need the outs more than the runs matter. There's also trading outs to prevent runs. And that means if you can't get the out, you give up on the out to make sure the run doesn't score. And when you're 4-3 in an important game like the one they were playing last night, and you've already had to claw your way back for those 3 runs to close that gap to 1 run, it is absolutely more important to stop that run from third scoring because you're still in a position, even with the bases loaded, where a ground ball ends the inning without injury. But by not stopping that ball...
I think the only issue that they had there is it was 2 outs, and if you can go, if had Hosmer been able to scoop that ball, or at least, and I think he was more surprised that he didn't get a piece of leather on it and stop it in its tracks. Had he been able to scoop it, then you get the out at first, the force out, and then no-run score anyway. I think he was more surprised that he missed it, and that's what ended up going back to, towards foul territory, ended up, allowing that second run to score. It was a crazy play all the way around, a crazy game, which kind of brings us into, and I think we took up more time than we wanted to on that topic. But honestly, it was a topic that I wanted to discuss because I can't disagree with what you're saying, because I didn't play long enough to understand the position in that way. But it was something that I really wanted our listeners to hear, because I think that it definitely, everyone just says, okay, it was a bad throw and Hosmer did what he could. And again, we're not knocking Hosmer on this here, but we're saying that there may have been a different choice he could have made that could have lessened the damage for the USA in that game. Now, that obviously brings us to kind of the precursor, the breakdown of the game that you guys are already going to see before you hear the show, most likely. I don't really want to break down the U.S. and the DR, because you've already seen them play once. They are, I don't think there's much doubt that they're probably the top two teams, although let's be honest, right now, man, Puerto Rico is, without a doubt, making a case for being one of the top two teams in this tournament. They're fantastic. They're young. The majority of their production comes from their 1 through 6 hitters.
They're destroying Venezuela right now.
Yeah, well, Venezuela's kind of just fallen apart, unfortunately. They couldn't.
And they're out, so they're really just there.
Exactly.
They're playing a game that means nothing.
This game means nothing either way, because Puerto Rico guaranteed their spot with the win against the U.S. Venezuela can't win because of how bad they have. They were 0-2 coming into the game. So I guess what gets me is we're looking at Puerto Rico advancing, and then either the DR or either the Dominican Republic or the USA into the semis. From what I've seen, I don't see how any other team from any other pool is going to win aside from one of these three. I think whichever of these two teams advances is going to hoist the banner, the two teams that do advance, one of those teams will end up hoisting the banner. I don't think there's anything else that's out there that really can challenge what these teams have been able to accomplish. And granted, it's because the majority of them are all big leaguers.
Right. And I don't see an opportunity for the Netherlands, as well as they played throughout this tournament. And I'm actually pretty surprised at the play from the Netherlands. They've played a good tournament. I don't see an opportunity for them to beat Puerto Rico. I just don't see it happening. Japan and whoever advances is going to be a great game in the semifinals, because Japan's just a lot of fun to watch. But that being said, the U.S. and the Dominican Republic game tonight, in my opinion, is going to be the deciding game as far as who advances to the finals in this tournament. I already think that Puerto Rico.
I gotta stop you 1 second, because I just saw this, and granted, guys, again, this is the 18th, so you guys will already see this. As we're doing the show, we don't really get the luxury of watching the NCAA tournament or a lot of the games because of trying to focus on this for you guys. Wisconsin just knocked out overall number 1 seed Villanova in the NCAA tournament. So the last 2 weeks, what's that sound? That sound that we're hearing today is almost, I think, every bracket just getting obliterated, blown up, and thrown in the trash.
First game, right? It's just.
It's what, the second game of the tournament, or second round. I'm not a huge basketball nut, but I love watching the tournament, especially when you see games down to the end of the wire and watching the last 5-6 minutes. Because you never know what's going to happen. I saw that, and as we're talking about, tournament play and who's going to do what, I just couldn't believe that as great as the baseball is that we're watching, it's unfortunately probably being overshadowed by the tournament that still has another three weeks to go or so before they crown a champion.
Right. But back to what I was trying to get to was the team who wins tonight, in my opinion, is going to be the team who advances to meet Puerto Rico in the finals. And I would love to watch the U.S. play Puerto Rico in the finals of this WBC. I think that would be an amazing game. However,
can they play because they're coming out of the second round pool in the same area? Will they go ahead and break that back apart?
Yeah, so this is the way it looks right now, okay?
Okay, because I haven't seen Puerto this, Rico, so I want to kind of get a feel.
Puerto Rico plays the Netherlands in semifinal round 1, or in semifinal 1. The winner of tonight's game will play Japan in semifinal 2. Japan has also already moved on. So 3 of the 4 spots are set. The winner of tonight's game playing that semifinal will play Japan and advance to the finals, and the winner of semifinal 1 will obviously advance to the finals.
Right.
Which means that either the DR or the U.S. can advance and play Puerto Rico in the finals. That
would be just fantastic. And that's, again, these last games will be at Dodger Stadium.
Right, and I assume that, and not to take anything away from the play of Japan or the Netherlands, they have both played incredibly good baseball. But
yeah, dude, the Netherlands are a team that I don't think anybody really saw being, and I don't say dominant, but just playing really strong, clean baseball that has taken them really deep into this tournament that I don't think any of us really expected.
Right, and that would obviously be the upset of the WBC. If Netherlands beat Puerto Rico in the semifinals, that would be the upset of the whole tournament. There's no getting around that. No one else, no other team could beat any other team and have it be more of an upset, in my opinion.
Even Japan beating the USA or the DR?
No, I don't think so. Because Puerto Rico is coming through this tournament in just mythical fashion. I mean, they're 5-0.
I don't think they've lost. Yeah, they haven't lost yet.
They're 5-0. The Netherlands, although playing really well, are
4-2.
4-2. They've lost 2 games, and I think that when you have a team like that, who now Puerto Rico is going to be 6-0 at the end of this game today. But when you have a team like that that's undefeated, like the DR was last time we did this, those are the guys, right? Anybody with any losses beating those guys, that's the upset of the tournament, right? That's the Wisconsin beating Villanova, right?
Yeah.
So
and obviously we know that the pitchers can go, I think, up to 85 pitches. So pitching becomes a bigger thing now. The guys that are slinging can go deeper. Which again, I get that there's a gap here, but I can't imagine that a lot. And Jimmy Leland, who is the USA manager, I mean, he was in the World Series, multiple World Series. Obviously, his last time was with the Tigers in 2012. He's going to run these guys the right way. He's not going to end up screwing a manager out of an arm to start the year. But, I mean, this whole pitching pool is kind of nice because you can grab guys who haven't had a chance to pitch and just throw them in there. Michael Fulmer was supposed to be that guy before he had a small injury, and he's back on target. But that definitely makes it different because you can pull from so many different areas just to throw an arm in there that you think is going to give you the best opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So the semifinals, in my opinion, are going to shape up what I'm hoping for. Look, tonight's game against the Dominican Republic for the United States is going to be an incredible game to watch. Probably one of the better games of this WBC. Obviously, Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic was a really hyped game because the Dominican Republic was coming in 11-0 in that game. So both of those teams were previously undefeated, Dominican Republic having been undefeated in the previous WBC. So coming into that was obviously the hyped matchup. But I think that the Dominican Republic and the U.S. game tonight, being that it's a winner-go-home game for both teams, is going to be really the game to watch.
Yeah. Plus the history of the first round with the comeback. I mean, there's going to be so much riding on this game. It's going to be a great game to watch. I see it sucks. I got to be up usually for work at 4:30 on Sunday, and I'm really starting to think that I'm not going to get a lot of sleep because I don't know if I'm going to turn the TV off if it's anything like it was last night. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Guys, a reminder, we are part of – I'm sorry, what's that, man?
Personally, I think that it's going to be one of the two teams playing tonight in Puerto Rico facing off in the finals this year.
And I mean, that should draw you know, and I hate to say that there's not a lot of parity, but that's kind of the nice thing about the way that all the pools happen is you do kind of, you get baseball at 10 o'clock in the morning, but also, you get teams like Japan and Netherlands, other areas that get to still come in, and make a decent run. And then, again, you never know what can happen. It's baseball. Round ball, round bat. I mean, crazy things can happen. So, guys, reminder, we are part of the Grueling Truth Network. Check out thegruelingtruth.net for all of your sports-related needs. Everything from the NFL draft that's coming up here in about a month, plus the NCAA tournament, of course, our show Out of Left Field, all that and more at thegruelingtruth.net, at Grueling Truth on Twitter, and The Grueling Truth on Facebook. That is thegruelingtruth.net, where legends speak. So, we promised you guys that there might be blood. Probably more figurative than literal because I mean, there's a little bit of distance between us for now. But we got, kind of a wild hair. A lot of guys have been doing it. I saw something, thought it would be fun. Chris agreed. So we actually went ahead and broke down all 6 divisions, the 3 in the AL, the 3 in the NL, and we ranked them top to bottom, 1 through 6, which we think is going to be the strongest overall division to the weakest overall division. So we're going to have a little bit of fun with that, see where we agree, where we disagree. I think for the most part we'll probably see a lot of things relatively similar, but it should be a little bit of fun for you guys. And, of course, we want your opinion. So once you hear this, if you think we have the rankings wrong, you think one's better than the other, you think one team may have pushed one a little bit further, let us know. Again, Out of Left Field, hosted by Chris and Graham on Facebook and at OO Left Field on Twitter. Leave us a comment. We'll talk back with you guys. We always enjoy the interaction, so have some fun with us. So if you want, Chris, I know you're getting a sip of water. I'll start off. My top division was the AL East. To me, it made the most sense. Red Sox won it last year, but both wild card teams came from that division. The Sox add Sale. Now, granted, they lose Poppy. Price is hurt, but shouldn't be a season thing. They're still the lead contender. The Blue Jays got Kendrys Morales in place of Encarnacion. He's no EE, but he's still a solid piece. And they have one of the best rotations in the AL. You can't take what Marcus Stroman did last night, which was very, a rough outing, and translate that into an entire season. He is still one of the best pitchers in the AL. The Orioles lost Matt Wieters. I don't think it's a big deal. I mean, we talked about, but they kept Mark Trumbo. Adam Jones is absolutely raking the ball in the WBC against very strong teams, which is going to, his confidence is going to skyrocket. You got Wellington Castillo, who looked really good in his time in the WBC. I want to see some pitching moves, which we've discussed, but they can contend. The Yankees made a ton of moves. Holiday, Chapman, Greg Bird. Rotation's getting older. We'll see what happens there. And the Rays are unfortunately going to be the Rays. But to me, the Yankees might be able to move past the Orioles for 4th place. They made a solid push at the end of last year, but I don't think the O's lost so much that we couldn't see another 1, 2, 3 out of the AL East to go into 2017 in October.
So I have a different number 1 division, and I'm going to start because the AL East is the obvious choice for number 1, and I admit that I'm really kind of taking a wild swing.
Is this your early flyer? This is
my early flyer. This is my early flyer. All right, because everything that you said is true. However, there's been no effort on the part of the Red Sox to replace the bat of David Ortiz. I think that's going to cause them to struggle a little bit as far as making contact. Of course, they still have Mookie Betts, who can hit really well, but there's no guarantee that Mookie Betts is going to continue the upswing that he's experienced and not go back to being the sort of replacement type player that he has been in the past. And David Price being hurt is, I think, more of a big deal than you are letting on. No, it's not going to be a season thing. Yes, he's going to come back and pitch. However, they're going to be behind the 8 ball. Chris Sale's a big addition, but they didn't really add to the offense. The O's did, in my opinion, picked up a new catcher who's probably going to be offensively better for them. Got rid of some dead weight, in my opinion. Obviously, extended Manny Machado, which is going to be really big. I think the Yankees are too young to compete.
Did you see that play he did about 2 nights ago?
Dude,
where, he basically threw it from the warning track in front of the dugout and got the out.
Yeah. Oh, I saw that. That was insane. Easily the strongest hot corner arm in baseball on Manny Machado. But keeping Manny Machado is going to be a big deal for the O's going forward. I think the Yankees are still too young to really compete, and I know that your dad's going to hate me to say this out loud because he and I have similar feelings about this team, but I personally see...
I get it. You're the more loved son than I am. I get it. Okay, I get it. You can stop rubbing it in.
I personally see a powerhouse in the making in the Yanks if they can bolster that rotation with young guys.
And if Sanchez keeps doing what he's doing, I agree. Right. I agree. It sucks, but they should be.
But I don't think that they can compete this year, which means, in my opinion, the O's and the Jays are going to fight for that top spot. They'll be hounded by the Sox, but I don't think the Sox are going to make it and that's my flyer pick. I don't think the Sox are going to the postseason this year.
Really? Even though Price struggled last year and Porcello won the Cy Young, really?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Wow, okay.
Listen, Porcello did great last year, but as I've said 100 times before, past performance is not a predictor of future performance, especially for pitchers. And Porcello's far past would never have predicted him being the Cy Young winner, and I don't think that he's going to keep that trend going.
But
I think
just to be devil's advocate, just for devil's advocate purposes, neither did Jake Arrieta.
That's true, and I don't know that Jake Arrieta is going to continue that. Though we'll get to him in a minute.
Fair enough. I'm good with that. Okay.
But I think that they're going to hound that third place position. I doubt they'll make it into the second place position in that division. The O's and the Jays are going to fight that out. Although, in my opinion, the Sox are the wild card in that sort of triumvirate, because the Sox, if the Jays can't get over the loss of Edwin Encarnacion, then the Sox will take that second spot. But I think it's the O's division to lose at this point, just because they've made some leaps forward in the off season, whereas
even with no rotational moves. I mean, and that's my biggest is. And again, I'm hurting my own case here, but to me, the Orioles are still a solid team, but they don't have enough pieces in that rotation, in my opinion, to contend. And granted, we're going to pick our early picks here in the next couple of weeks, but that just really surprised me that you think it's the Orioles division to lose. And not, I would think, if anything, you'd say the Blue Jays would be the likely favorite. So
I told you I was going to start the show. I told you I was going to start the show making wild accusations, right?
Yeah, I mean, and normally you accuse me of this. So then, I mean, and I think I know where you're going, but so do you have the AL West then as your number one?
I do. The AL West is my number one, and here's
they're
why.
My number two.
Right, and this is where we're going to flip flop, I think, and I'm pretty sure the rest of our picks are going to be probably in line with each other. But here's what I think about the reason that I think the AL West is going to be the better division. And again, I'm not saying that any team in the AL West is necessarily going to be better than any team in the AL East. I'm basing this specifically on the fact that I think more teams in the AL West are going to compete for postseason slots than teams in the AL East are. And the reason I say that is because the Orioles, I think, and here's another flyer, but I'm sure you agree, I think that the AL West is the Orioles division is the Astros division to lose this year. the Texas Rangers are aging out of their window. If they don't shore some things up quick, they're going to be in a world of hurt, while the Astros have made huge moves, added huge bats, really shored up the glaring holes that they had in their lineup coming into the offseason. And I think I've made some positive strides in shoring up that rotation. In my opinion, the Astros win that division. However, I also think that the Texas Rangers make a move and end up winning a wild card slot out of that division, while the Mariners, who made a late move last season to pick up a wild card slot and only missed it by a game or two, I think with the addition of Gene Segura, a consistent, strong bat, they are going to make a move to make another wild card run.
And Segura has looked solid in the WBC as well, and that's really why. And I'm kind of with you. What surprised me, because I'm in relative agreement with you here, and I'll break down a couple of mine in a second. But what surprises me is that where I think the Yankees, I'm not saying that they're going to contend for an actual postseason slot, but I think they could improve or at least have a decent shot at making the East uncomfortable. You know, they could be a spoiler for somebody. To me, you think the Angels have a chance, and I don't. Their rotation was horrible. Jared Weaver is gone. Now, granted, they got Cameron Maybin from the Tigers, and Danny Espinosa came over from the Nationals, but, I mean, Mike Trout is really, the mainstay, and Albert Pujols is getting older. He still had some pop last year, but I don't know how much I trust that pop to go forward the next couple of seasons.
Now, let me clarify a little here. I don't think that the Angels are going to compete for a playoff spot, and I know that the A's aren't. I mean, I don't think the A's are going to break 500 this year. They'll be lucky to break 450, in my opinion. I like the A's. I grew up watching them, but they're terrible. And if they don't turn some things around and get some owners who are willing to spend some money, they're going to be terrible, or they're going to leave Oakland, one of the two. And they might leave Oakland and still be terrible. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I think that the Angels have the same opportunity that the Yankees do to make the AL West uncomfortable, especially for teams like the Mariners, who, while I think they can compete for the postseason, are still going to be hounded on the heels by the Angels, because Mike Trout is not going to sit idly and not put everything that he has into making the Angels a better team than they were last year. I still don't think they're going to break the 500 barrier.
Okay.
Or much past the 500 barrier, but I think they'll be hounding that third spot, not necessarily as far as getting into the wild card. I think that the Mariners are going to be better than them and better than other teams in other divisions.
Okay.
That's going to get them that wild card slot. And that's why I put the AL West top, because I think they're going to have three teams who compete for playoff berths.
Okay, and that was basically my same idea there with the East. I just felt that the East had better, that there's better pitching overall in the East. To me, the rotation of the Red Sox and the rotation of the Jays really outperforms the rotation of all the West teams. I understand what you're saying. I don't think the Angels are going to really make that big of a splash. I don't think that they're going to challenge many people. I'm with you on Oakland. I mean, at best they got Rajai Davis from Cleveland, and his biggest feat last year, obviously is that homer off of Chapman that tied the game. Sonny Gray's hurt again, which we discussed. They're going to be a bottom three team again, if not one of the worst. The Padres are probably going to be one of the worst. One of the things that I will agree with you, though, that the Mariners had to struggle with, they had the worst travel of every team, because they're so far up in the Northwest. I mean, at least with the Red Sox, you're close to New York, you're close to you're not close to anybody when you're up in Seattle. I mean, and you know that because you live there. To me,
they're
I'm
750 miles away from. They're 750 miles. No, they're 1,000 miles away from their closest division competitor in the A's.
Yeah. So to me, I like that they picked up. The Rangers got Napoli and Carlos Gomez. Lucroy is going to come back. I was surprised they didn't use him last night in the WBC, but he's looked pretty good. They need outfield help and they need depth in the outfield, help in the rotation for the Rangers. It's definitely getting old. But to me, the Mariners were they got Drew Smyly, and Smyly looked great the other day for coming from the Rays. He looked really solid. Gerard Dyson from KC, Gene Segura, as you said, that was the biggest piece for me. And I like the fact of Carlos Ruiz from the Dodgers. And we discussed this back when we talked to Mariners. Having that veteran guy there to help an aging rotation is what you need. If they want to compete, to me, Carlos Ruiz was a great piece because he knows how to, I think, get the most out of guys who are aging. And then Dan Vogelbach's going to be a great rookie first baseman, I think.
And one thing that the Mariners are going to have to do this season, and I know it's hard to hear, but the Mariners are going to have to step back and take a long, hard look at Felix Hernandez. Because I understand that he's probably one of the better pitchers that's ever come through there.
Yeah. I think
even
Randy
when you're
Johnson's
considering
probably the top
right.
overall, but perfect game, king. I mean, he it's his kingdom, and unfortunately, the king is falling. I agree with you.
Right. So they're going to have to step back, and they're going to have to take a long, hard look at him and really see if he's still their number one guy. I don't think he is.
I just don't think they have. I don't think they have much else there to replace him at number one right now, and that's the difficulty. But that to me is why I dropped the West. I agree with you on the Stros. We've talked to them a bunch. Obviously, had a chance to talk with Brian McCann. Mark DeRosa agreed that they're probably going to be one of the favorites. Keuchel should be back to normal. We want to know what Lance McCullers is going to do. You and I both know that Carlos Correa and Jose Altuve were playing out of their gourds in the WBC. They're just raking the ball. Altuve was pumped up. Correa is still playing. I mean, you got to love it. So, for me, again, East and then the West and the AL 1 and 2. For 3, I'm actually, and this is kind of a toss-up for me, but I went NL Central number 3 and the NL East number 4.
See, I went NL West number 4.
Okay.
I think the NL Central is a lock for number 3, in my opinion. The Cubs are going to win that division, in my opinion. It's their division to lose.
Definitely.
No doubt.
It's their season to lose again. Definitely, yeah.
Right. But a rejuvenated Cardinals team might actually give them a run from their money. And if Yadier Molina plays the way he's played in the WBC, the NL Central is going to be a lot of fun to watch. But unless Andrew McCutchen breaks out of his funk, the Pirates, the Reds, and the Brew Crew don't compete this year.
Yeah, and that's my biggest issue there is the Pirates always seem to be missing a piece or two, but it's never the same piece. They fix one, they lose another. Obviously, moving McCutchen to right field doesn't seem to be a big deal in the WBC. It's a good thing. I think he's going to get dealt if they aren't contending. That's my biggest worry there. And the only reason I really have the NL Central third is because the Pirates have a chance of being something, but you never know. Ivan Nova pitched well coming from the Yanks. Got to see if he can do that again.
They could be that spoiler team. Yeah,
I don't think the Pirates are going to contend, but Clint Hurdle's bunch can't ever be counted out. The Reds, their starter, Anthony DeSclafani, he has a UCL sprain. They dealt Brandon Phillips to Atlanta. Billy Hamilton had a better year batting, but the problem with Billy Hamilton is speed never goes on a slump, but if you can't get on base, you can't use it. So he's got, and Joey Votto's contract is just sucking the life out of that team. And the Brewers are sporadic. I still think that Braun, he was in trade talks last year. I think he'll be in trade talks again this year. Another piece that'll probably get dealt. Now, you said you have the NL West 4th. I have the NL West 5th.
And so here's the reason I have the NL West 4th as opposed to 5th. And we can just discuss the East and West. The Nationals are the expected favorites for the NL East, as we've discussed.
Well, yeah. I think
you
and I, but
they're the expected favorites. However, like I said, the Mets are young and hungry, and they really do think that it was their time to win last year. And with a financially stable Giannis Cespedes and a deep starting rotation that all it needs to do is return to form, this year could be the Mets' blue and orange year.
Yeah.
So that makes the Nationals and the Mets the two competing teams in that division. However,
plus you get Adam Eaton, Trey Turner's back on the infield, and Turner had a great year last year, and he was playing out of position. So yeah, it definitely, and then the Wieters thing, we'll see how well that goes. But yeah, I definitely think the Nationals can.
But
challenge.
The Nationals are either going to make or break it this year. they're either going to win that division or they're not going to get into the postseason. That's my opinion. They're either going to do or die this year. And the Phillies and Braves, even though they're really far along in their rebuilding, they're not far enough along to compete, in my opinion. Now, both teams could be deceptively deep in their lineups and could be spoiler-type teams in that division, especially for the Nationals, but I don't think that they're going to be making playoff competition-type runs, and obviously the Marlins won't. The loss of Jose Fernandez, the probability that the report into the fault of Jose Fernandez is going to backlash onto that team a little bit.
I don't think that much, I think the.
Hold on, hear me out. Just in the minds of the fans who went out, and yes, him being intoxicated, speeding, and recklessly irresponsible doesn't change the fact that it was a tragedy, but it does change how they looked at it when it happened. And fans
so
are
you think fan perception will change because he's been found at fault and everything else? Right.
Giancarlo Stanton is never healthy. He's never going to finish a season, I'm convinced, for that team. I don't think the Marlins are going to break 500 this year, so they simply won't compete. I don't think the Phils and Braves will either. But I think
the Phils could.
I don't
or come close. I mean, and I get what you're saying, and I agree. The Marlins, we'll see that they have some decent pieces. Their lefty, Adam Conley. If you could look up who their pitcher is for me, the young kid took a no hitter, a perfect game into the seventh last year, and I pulled him out. He definitely was a very strong piece next to Jose, and as he gets I think another year or two under his belt, will be comfortable taking on that number one role. But to me, the Phillies finished fourth only because the Braves were horrible last year. But the Phillies picked up Howie Kendrick. He's a veteran. Clay Buchholz, who I think it's a good thing for Buchholz to be out of Boston. Not so much that he was as bad. I think part of it, he had a bad year, and I think Boston just wasn't his home anymore. But I think he'll feel solid there in Philly. Hellickson still looks good. Buchholz pitches behind him. Michael Saunders. And then, of course, they re-signed Maikel Franco. And that we talked that that's a big young piece to build around for that team. They have a ways to go before they can contend, but I think they could improve 7 or 8 games, which would have them flirting with the 500 mark. And then, of course, both John Smoltz and Tom Glavine, who we've talked to, said that 2017 isn't the year, but next year look out, because 2018 could really be a year the Braves begin to make some pretty big ripples and some noise in the East. Of course, Julio Teheran still pitched well and should do so again this year.
And to be honest with you, I think that's probably the Phillies' timeline as well. 2018, 2019 is when they're really going to start to make waves. And I think that by that time, the Nationals will have aged out of their window.
Yeah.
Strasburg is a question mark for consistency.
Agreed.
Scherzer's hurt, and I get that Scherzer's the reigning Cy Young, his second Cy Young win, but this is not the first time that Scherzer's gone down with an injury, and I don't think that he can really sustain too many more injuries and continue Cy Young type play for much longer, especially if he keeps hurting his hands and his arms.
So then tell me why you have the West fourth. Now, you had the East fifth, so did we flip-flop these two?
Right, so the West is we flip-flop. So the West I have fourth. And here's why. The West is the Dodgers division right now. The bringing back Jansen, bringing back Utley, having a healthy Clayton Kershaw. The West is the Dodgers division to lose, in my opinion. However, definitely, the addition of Melanson in San Francisco is really great. But the bullpen and the starting rotation still worry me. Matt Cain, who is still competing for that number 5 slot in the starting rotation, has a +9 ERA in 4 starts this spring, and that terrifies me. I don't think that the Giants can make a run to win that division if Matt Cain ends up in the starting rotation. I think that is,
to me, Samardzij's the wild card with that team.
I realize Samardzij's the wild card with the team. Matt Cain is the anchor. And I don't mean anchor in a good way. I mean anchor as in weighing the starting rotation down. Matt Cain, in my opinion, is a loss every 5 days. And they cannot afford
that Ty Blatt should probably get a shot to run that number 5 slot. I think it would make
Ty
sense.
Blatt should be in that number 5 slot. In my opinion, that is his slot, and he needs to take it.
Okay.
And he has pitched pretty well this spring, not as well as he probably would have liked to, but I think that shutout start in the playoffs last year goes a long, long way towards making Ty Blatt a reasonable number 5 spot pitcher.
So,
however,
and you and I have basically the same reasons on Dodgers and Giants. You and I are basically in agreement on the top 2 teams. Now, with the Rockies, now Desmond's there, and the fracture I'm not worried about, but how do you go for the 3, 4, and 5 teams?
So the Diamondbacks aren't going to compete. They made, in my most humble opinion, they made a huge mistake dealing Segura to the Mariners. That was a big mistake because they didn't get anything back for him, and they gave up their most consistent bat.
Yeah.
The Padres
and Dan Plesac told us he thinks they probably might be the sleeper pick, and I respect that guy. He works for MLB Network. He's where you and I would love to be, but I think they are.
I think they are the sleeper pick. They are the sleeper pick for number 4.
For number 4.
But the Padres have finally decided to rebuild. Finally decided to commit to rebuilding. So they're not going to compete for a while.
You mean by
not that they've competed.
You mean by forging injury reports, right?
Right. Not that they've competed in the past, but they finally committed to doing a rebuild. It's going to be years before they ever get into competition, if they ever get into competition. In my opinion, the sleeper here and the sleeper that to me makes the West better than the East is the Rockies, because no doubt in my mind that if the Phils and Braves are the spoiler type teams in the East, the Rockies are the spoiler team in the West. However, the Rockies will be, in my opinion, better based on some of the good moves that they've made in the offseason, will be better than both the Phils and the Braves, which makes the West, in my opinion, a stronger division than the East.
And you know what? I can't disagree there. And that was really where I was fighting with myself, is that I thought that there was a possibility where the Phillies could improve. The Rockies finished 75-87 last year. Getting Desmond is great. Story is back. There's a lot of good things that the Rockies are building on. What worries me is that rotation. And not that they need more, they're just young. And you're asking a lot for young guys to keep the ball in a yard where you have the most home runs hit in a year, but also the highest ERA every season. That was the only thing for me that made it tough. And then, of course, there's no doubt that the AL Central is going to be the weakest. It was the weakest last year. The White Sox and the Twins didn't do anything. They got rid of Chris Sale. Quintana's eventually going to be moved. They're just waiting to get the best return they can for him. The Royals, there's a possibility here, but it's going to be small. Plus, unfortunately, you have the passing of Yordan Ventura. I don't know if the Royals are going to be able to. They finished 500 last year. I don't know if they're going to do much better than that this year. I'd love for them to. The Indians, it should be theirs to win, but Tigers, you never know. With Verlander, Fulmer, we got to see how Miggy does with the health, and I'm surprised that they moved Cameron Maybin. To me, that was a guy who I thought was a strong piece in the outfield. He was quick, decent at the plate. So the Tigers, that was a surprising move, but they still finished 8 games back. I still think overall when you have three teams finishing at 500 or above, the problem is one of those teams is finishing right on the cusp of being 500. Overall, it's the weakest overall division. Granted, I could probably say the National League East same, but there aren't enough teams in the Central to really give the Indians a solid run, in my opinion.
Right. So remember before the show, I told you that I had my picks done, and I even wrote down justifications for all of them.
Uh-huh.
I want to read you the justifications that I made for the AL Central being number 6 overall out of 6. I said this is probably the Indians' division. Though the Royals or Tigers might make a run, they're both aging out of their windows. The Twins don't have a window, and I'm not sure the White Sox are even in the house. In my opinion, I don't think that the Royals or the Tigers have what it takes to make playoff runs.
See, I thought the Twins were like your pesky in-laws who live up north, and you just hope they don't come down to see you and stay for very long.
The Twins are stuck in the basement with no windows. But the Royals window is rapidly closing. I don't know that it's going to reopen, especially with the tragic loss of their
There's a draft. That's about it. There's a draft.
Right. The Tigers, I get what you're saying. Fulmer's a great pitcher. And
Verley's still strong.
Yes, Verley's still strong. But like I said when we were talking about Verley could go at any minute, just like other great pitchers. So I think that the Tigers and Royals are both aging out of their windows, and the Indians, this is their division to win. I mean, to lose, really.
You get Encarnacion. Yeah, your pieces should be coming back. They're checking Carrasco should be coming back. Brantley's getting healthy. The pieces they didn't have last year are on the way back, and I agree. The things that kind of kept them probably from winning last year are all back, and I think that at the end of it, they should have a hopefully a relatively easy run, probably be a 90-game plus winner. So, I'm surprised. We actually it was more even than I thought it was going to be. So, guys, if I disappointed you by that, my bad. I didn't mean to kind of promise more than what came out of it. I expected more contentious stuff, but hey, I guess that's kind of like baseball. You never know what you're going to get. So, man, again, another a solid show. Thank you guys for sticking with us. We are actually getting pretty close. We're about 2 months away from turning a year old. So really excited about that. You guys have been with us through a ton of stuff. We, like I said, about 14 days or so from the baseball. I think 2 weeks from tomorrow is when the baseball season kicks off into full swing. Opening day is there. We're excited for that. Enjoy the WBC. Obviously, I know some might hate when they hear this what happens, but it's going to be great. We're about 4 days away from the final game at Dodger Stadium. Enjoy it. We're going to be talking about it next week, breaking everything down. Yeah, I believe March 22nd is when Chris, I saw you shaking your head, is when the final is.
My brain's not really
obviously you're so school focused that, man, everything's kind of gone up. There was much up there anyway, but hey, you know what? That's why you're here, and we appreciate you, Ish. So, guys, again, hope you have a great week. Be safe. Love one another. Chris, get to work on that homework, man. Have a couple of drinks. Let everything kind of go, and I'll give you a last word and take us home, man.
Just so you know, the Puerto Rico versus Venezuela game is over. Well, it was over a long time ago, but it is 11-2 in the top of the ninth, and Puerto Rico is actually batting right now, so who knows if that score is going to stand. But it's 11-2 in the top of the ninth right now, and the Puerto Rico has definitely cemented itself as the top contender in this year's World Baseball Classic.
It's going to be a fun last couple of days of WBC, and then everyone gets back. We'll see how much of the fire and the weird blonde hair, and in some cases blonde beards, Carlos Beltran, they bring back, and see if what these guys are doing in the WBC ends up coming back to their teams. They start launching baseballs out of left field. Guys, Graham and Chris, have a great weekend. See you next week.